Now I'm going to break this easy bake into two, actually, possibly three. And the reason is, this is all about sourdough, not soda bread, sourdough. And not sourdough with yeast in, this is pure sourdough. So part one really is, I want to talk to you a little bit about the starter, or the chef, or the madre, as it's called in many countries throughout Europe. Now, what is a starter? Well, basically you're going to harness wild yeast at home. So you're going to grow your own wild yeast. Now, to do that, you need flour and water, and that's pretty much it. Now, I've read a lot of books. You see a lot of books with how you start it. You do see the odd video and explaining it. This is a very basic, straight through, to the point, and what you're looking for at the end. So we have the end one and how you start it. So you will start with strong white flour, into which equal amounts of flour to water. And all you're going to do with that is just stir it together with a fork. You get a fork in there. And it's a very soft looking dough. That there, you want to put that into a sealed little container. Now that sealed little container, you're going to leave for about 2 to 3 days. Now, that lump of dough needs sealing or covering up. If it's in a small little unit as it's growing, you can see them growing because it will grow in 2 to 3 days. If you find it's quite active and starts to bubble on the second day, that's good. Chances are it's probably going to be end of the second, beginning of the third. And on the third day, you'll see this beginning to bubble and grow. And that's got no yeast in it. That's just flour and water. The wild yeast, the spore, the lactobacillus, which is the bacteria that's in the air, and it's mainly around sort of greenery and countryside. You get it all over the world, but it's everywhere, it's airborne. Once that gets in to the flour and water, it feeds on the flour, produces carbon dioxide, and then you get this growth, natural growth with natural wild yeast. It's very different to baker's traditional bread, which is baker's yeast, which is made from sugar. This is wild yeast, which gives the sourdough its pungent, that little kick, that little smell, that characteristic flavour that you look for in a good sour. So you leave this for 2 to 3 days. Once it's grown, you need to feed it again because it's exhausted the flour. It needs more to keep it growing, to keep it alive. So you want to mature that flavour. You want to get that beautiful flavour coming from your sour. So because you don't want to double it, throw half away. If you want to use it in a straight bread dough with yeast, that's fine. Use it in a dough, it'll add a little bit of flavour to it. So the remaining bit, add the same again, equal amounts of flour, more water the same again, mix that together with a fork, leave it again, 1 to 2 days, possibly 2 days. In the second day, you'll find it bubbling a little bit quicker than the first time. So rather than 3 days, it might take 2 days. It may even take 1 day, depending on where you are and how warm it is. Try and keep your starter in an environment of 20 degrees. You don't want it to dip below 10. So it'll still work, but it just takes longer, that's all. So on the second day, throw half away again, or put it in a bread, feed it again. More flour, more water, same as I did here. Mix that together, and that will grow. And as it starts to grow, it'll get faster and faster each time you feed it. Once it starts to grow within a day, you know it's become very active. And what you're looking for is this. Now this is mine. I've only had this one for about 6-7 months or so. It's got a beautiful smell to it. It's quite an earthy smell. Now if you see all the little bubbles in the top, you see all those beautiful little, it's active, it's really active, it's alive. So in replacement of using yeast in my bread, I use this. For instance, I think it's 450 grams of flour, and I use 150 grams of this in replacement of yeast in my dough, and that gives it a beautiful flavour. It's not going to come up, it's not going to rise like a conventional bread. It takes much longer. In fact, when I've added this to my dough, it normally takes me 10 to 12 hours. If it's a bit warmer, it can take 10, possibly 9. In the winter, when it gets a bit cooler in my kitchen, it takes a little bit longer. It can take 12 hours. But in here, you have these beautiful bubbles. If I just open that up a little bit, if you look at that, it's like a sponge. You see that? It's like a sponge inside. Look at those bubbles in there. It's beautiful. So what I'm doing, if I was going to make a sourdough now, I might do later, but if I was going to make a sour now, I would take a big scoopful of this. Look at that. Gloopy. It smells lovely. Take a couple of scoops of that, which is about 150 grams, and I'll use that in my sourdough later. But because you're depleting your sour now, you need to feed this. So again, you add a little bit of flour to your mixture, to your starter, your madre, and a little bit of water, equal amounts of water. Blend that together with the rest of it in the bowl. Get your fork in there, right down to the bottom, scrape down the sides. And then that will come back, that'll actually grow again within 8 hours. If you're not going to use it, or you know, say, I'm not going to make a sourdough this week or this month, get the whole thing, pop it in the fridge, leave it in the fridge weeks, months, it's fine. You'll end up with a little brown film on it. And you think, oh no, it's gone off. Just tip that away. You can fold it in, but I tend to tip it away. Then feed it with more flour and water, and it'll come straight back to life again. That is the secret to a good starter. Once it's active within 8, 9, 10 hours, you can utilize it and make the best sourdough ever, and it will change your life. So today I'm going to show you how to make actual sourdough. Now in here is the starter, which we covered on a previous recipe, and we're going to use this to rise our sourdough. So now we're going to break this down into 2 parts. The first part will be basically mixing up the sour and all the ingredients in a mixer, and then mixing it for a good 10, 15 minutes. And then we're going to leave it overnight. And then basically we're going to shape it briefly, and then we're going to bake it. And we're going to have a look how it turns out. So you know how to make the starter. If you've missed that, go back and watch it. So I've got my flour in here, into which I'm going to add my salt straight in. That then goes into the mixer, hook on, water goes straight in. We need to mix that now for a good 10, possibly 15 minutes. You want it nice and smooth before you add the sour. So I'm just going to weigh up the last ingredient to go in, which is 150 grams of the sour. And because I've taken sour out of this, I'm now going to feed my sour culture again with a bit more flour and a little bit of water. Use a fork, a good mix inside. So the mixer's been on now for 3-4 minutes. It's beginning to get elastic now. And you break it. It's breaking a little bit too quick. It's stretching a little bit and then breaking a little bit early, so it needs longer mixing. I'm looking for a nice smooth dough. It's a good indication that it's mixed properly. It's getting there now actually, it's not far off at all. It's quite hypnotic looking at a dough. I remember when I was first in the bakery, I remember as a kid watching the bakers in my dad's bakery sort of staring into the mixer going, you see the mottled look on there? We want that to be smooth, it's still mottled. You see it's rough, it's not smooth, that needs to mix for a bit longer. So that'll mix now till it's nice and smooth. Another 5 minutes or so should be fine. See? Now you're beginning to open it up. Needs a little bit longer, it's breaking just a little bit too early. So I'll give that another couple of minutes and then I'll put the sour in there. Okay, I'm happy with that. Now I'm going to put my sour yeast, if you like, straight in. That'll mix for another 10 minutes, 5-10 minutes, and it'll be good to rest. So initially when you're mixing, always start a little bit slow, let them introduce itself. It's like anyone when they mix something else. You know, you start off nice and slow till you get to know everybody. And then as you get to know each other, it gets much faster. You can't rush this bit. You know, you want it to be nice and smooth and elastic, looking amazing. And I'm happy with that now. Take the blade off. How smooth it is. It's just stretching. It's not breaking. It's just stretching because you've built up the gluten and it's good to go. And this goes into here. To a slightly oiled bowl. And basically, temperature in this kitchen at the moment, probably around 20. And realistically, in a warm kitchen, it'd probably take 8 hours. This is probably going to take 12, 13 hours now of resting, and it'll reach coming up to the top of the bowl. And then all we're going to do is gently tip it out, shape it, and then we're going to pop it into a pan and bake it off. But that's it. This is the hard work. I mean, all you've got in there is flour, salt, sour, and water. Those 4 key ingredients, which have been around for thousands of years in the world. This is why sourdough is so fascinating. What I will do in half an hour's time is just gently stretch that, see if it's okay, but it should be just fine. You can either get a cloth, cover it up, or I just get any old bag which has been lying around the house, cover it up, leave it. Join me next time for the last part of the sourdough epic saga, where I actually show you how to shape and finally bake your beautiful sourdough. Okay, today I'm going to show you how to finish off your sourdough, at least shape and prepare for the oven. Now, this is the dough that's been mixed and placed in this plastic bowl. Now, obviously this has taken, what, 12 hours now? It was quite cold last night, and obviously the temperature in the kitchen plummets and slows this up. But it has taken 12, 13 hours, and this is about right, this is the right height. Traditionally, I would put it in a banneton like this, but I wanted to do a plastic bowl or a glass bowl so you can make one at home easily with what you've got. So what I need to do is get this dough out onto the surface. Now the reason why I'm putting it on this paper is I'm going to transfer it from this into the pan and then into the oven to bake. So I'm basically creating a little tray for it. So initially you need to put plenty of flour onto the paper. As you tip the dough out, it'll spread slightly, and then we're going to try and tuck underneath just to straighten it up, keep its shape. So plenty of flour goes on there. Grab our dough and just let it roll out. You've lost some air by doing that, but you can see it's still quite a full loaf. A bit more flour onto the top. Try and gather it in with your fingers initially. You've got something to slide underneath now, so you can get your fingers underneath and shape this dough, trying to keep its core round shape. Using a scraper is also good. Get underneath there. Gently coerce it. You're not trying to knock the air out of this stage, you're trying to keep everything in. And again, just gathering it in, tucking it in. You see how active it is? It's a lively little dough. So you can see just by gently coercing it into the middle, it gives it a little bit more height. It's quite a soft dough, so the hydration on this is quite high, around 70%, 65-70%, which is high for a bread. It means it's got a lot of water in it. So it's got plenty of air in there. And actually, I'm going to leave this to rest for about another half hour, and then I'm going to place it into this pan. Now, this is the pan I use, so it's got a lid on it as well, the same, so it just inverts. If you've got you're basically looking for a heavy based pan to put into the oven with a dome because the bread will grow. And so this needs to be preheated. So I've set my oven to 210, which is quite high. But don't forget the heat's got to penetrate this first. So you're allowing the dough to grow naturally. Then you take the lid off and finish the bake off. So when I get a chance to put this into there, I have to heat this. So this will go into the oven for a good 5 minutes just to get some heat into it. Bring it out, cut this paper off, nice, trim it down, lift it into the pan, straight into the oven, pop the lid on, and then bake it off. It's as simple as that. But it has taken a little bit of time. But actually, it proves the point that nature does most of the work with a sourdough. It's not a case of, spending hours doing it, because actually over the whole process of making the sourdough, you probably spend 10 minutes on it maximum. All the work's been done by nature and of course the oven. Now this has been heating in the oven for the last 5-10 minutes. My loaf's been resting for the last hour and it's ready to go in the oven. Now at this stage I need to transport that into the oven, into the pot itself. Now easiest way to do it is just trim round the extra bit of paper. I'm just going to cut a square using a blade. So the thing is about sourdough, it's always nice to have your own pattern on it. For instance, you could put a template on it of your initials and dust a bit of flour onto it. It's very nice. But cutting it allows and it shows the bread where to break, and it should break a little bit and it just creates a beautiful design on the top. So you've got the gorgeous structure with a lovely pattern. So this is ready, cut. It's going to go into the oven, 210, for around 30 minutes. Now the thing is, it's going to have a lid on it. So this is the lid. Spray it with a little bit of water just to create a little steam bath in there. And then place the lid onto the top carefully. And away you go. So after 30 minutes of baking, take the lid off and then it needs to stay in for at least 25, another 30 minutes just to brown the loaf because the rise has already happened. And there she is. She's been browning for the last 30 minutes. And that could be your very first sourdough. So you end up with the slashes on the top, nice little pattern. It's beautiful and golden brown. I like a strong color on a sourdough. So you want to leave that to cool just for about 5-10 minutes, bring it out onto a wire, leave it to cool for a couple of hours, and then start slicing into it. Have it with lashings of butter. Now that could have been your very first sourdough. If you've made it before, start playing with the water content, up it slightly, put another 30 ml in, watch what happens to the dough, treat it exactly the same, just be careful with it. I know it takes over 24 hours to make a good loaf, but it's worth it, and it's a little skill that's been around for thousands of years. And that little bit of knowledge is the starting point for you to make your own amazing sourdough at home. And it's as simple as that, really. There are plenty of other recipes on the Paul Hollywood Easy Bakes channel on YouTube. Click subscribe, click like if you did like it, put your comments in, and hope you enjoy making your own sourdough at home, because I promise you it will change your life.